Hi, everybody. Um, so I've been reflecting on why I set up this channel in the first place, and mostly it was for me as like a kind of well, originally the idea was to practice talking through something or talking out loud, which is something that I feel I'm not as good at as I am at some other things. So it's an area I kind of wanted to develop. And so what I started doing was solving the Excel World Championship cases. Um, Obviously, a lot of people solve those, and they kind of solve them in a more prepared way than me. But that's all right. I feel like though I've done some solves, and I've given kind of the authentic experience of attempting these questions blank from the first time. And I worry that I'm dedicating too much of the time to kind of solving the question itself, and maybe not therefore achieving kind of what I set out to do when I decided to start doing this to push myself. So I know a lot of people are just subscribed for maybe watching those occasionally, although um, if more power to you if you're watching 5 hour, 7 hour solves of these kinds of things, or whatever else I get up to. Um, so again, this is just a learning tool. I don't feel obligated to watch this for any reason. Um, Basically, what I'm going to do is I've got a spreadsheet here. Just share my screen. Got a spreadsheet here, which basically has a long list of either kind of topics to talk about or actions to do. So, either some kind of spicy maths take or philosophical topic. There are a few attempt actions here. I should probably add a. I know Dim is into like cryptic crosswords and things. I'm sure I'd enjoy those. So maybe I should add some of those as well. Um, STEP, if you're wondering what STEP is, this is like the maths exam for getting into Cambridge, and the kind of half-hour questions are meant to be. I don't really know how I'd do that on a screen, um, but I'm sure I'd have fun working it out. Advent of Code, if you're not familiar with that, it's kind of and also programming. Well, these ones are programming questions, as are kind of leak code ones. A lot of the top software hiring places want people who can solve leak code questions reliably. Although, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. Um, so there's a bit of debate over whether this is a good idea or not. Um, but it's a fun set of programming questions. Maybe it'll give me some case ideas or something like that for writing Excel cases. um, we've got the championship questions. I've actually done all of the 2022 ones now, so this would be a second attempt. And I feel like doing a second attempt is kind of what helps you learn something. There's more value you get out of doing a second attempt after a full first attempt. um, you can reflect on your original approach and how it went. So yeah, and then I've got like some personal topics here. Some of them are a bit kind of it's hard to explain what they are without like getting into them. Some of them are just like known topics that that they're explicitly stated things you can go and look up. Um, some of them, just on films I've seen, for example. Uh, so some on people that we might know. Um, more personal stuff. Yeah, I'll just scroll through this slowly in case you're interested in what might come up. And then what I'll do is I'll basically just throw a random number generator, and I'll have a go at explaining what's going on. I think my first attempts will be probably quite weak, not very good, but I'm hoping that I will get better as I go, and therefore develop as a person. I'm sure there are many other topics that I would have I would have added here if I thought of them, but maybe we can add more in time if we end up doing this again. So I'm going to run between this. Well, I'm going to index this actually, and then well, I'm going to let these be topics. Let topics be these. And then I'm going to index topics, run between rows, or one and rows of topics. And I'm going to hit enter and we'll see what it lands on. And then I'll probably instantly regret doing this. Oh, look at that. Excel World Championship case design. I'm just going to copy this formula. What a crazy thing for it to land on. And then I'll just paste, I can't paste values over this without changing something on. Stick this in Notepad, copy, value, paste, and then stick this formula back in. Cool, Excel World Championship case design. So, I mean, there's two things I could talk about here. So the first thing I could talk about is just rules for new people who are designing their own cases. What kind of things you should look out for, what you should try to put in there, and so on. And then secondly, I could talk about my personal case designs and what I try to include that isn't necessarily what people should try to include, but just from my personal philosophies, what I try to include. And I think, let me just double check. I think I wrote down a different point about my favorite kind of Excel World Cup cases. Yeah, I've got a different point for that. So I won't go through kind of historic existing cases that I've used as inspiration. I'll just talk about my personal design philosophies and what you should include if you're making your own ones. So let me just remind myself. Okay, so the topic is Excel World Championship case design. So if you're writing a case, the main advice that you'll always be given is that the case should be easy to understand and kind of the question should be quite succinct. And this is because ultimately the primary goal when you're designing a case, not quite the primary goal, but close enough, is that people enjoy it, right? So people are going to do the case, they're going to like it, they're going to come back next time, solve more cases. They're going to tell their friends about it. The idea is the case is one of the things it needs to be if they're going to do that is that the case should be enjoyable. And one thing that kind of quite consistently makes the cases not very enjoyable is having the very long instructions or kind of ambiguity in the questions. You end up just feeling like you're stuck solving it, or that you're having to do all of this reading and not really, um, and it is quite difficult to translate that into actions. It's kind of not a very enjoyable process. And also, kind of in particular, there are many international entrants, of course, because it's the World Championship. And this is going to be less true in the upcoming UK chapter, but certainly for that, it's easiest to have understandable instructions in foreign languages if they're very very simple. Um, so keeping the question short is one way to do this. Having the um, examples be set up in a way where it's checking kind of very particularly all of the behaviors you're asking for, and or just asking for one behavior per question is another kind of important way to do this. I particularly liked Klinsmann's isometric chaos, which had kind of nice visual pictures. This won't always be possible, of course, but if you can have a nice visual such that somebody could look at it and kind of instantly work out any of the edge cases in a particular case, that would be quite advantageous as well. So yeah, keep it nice and short. I'll also say don't do maybe try to, I wouldn't say don't deviate from the format at all, but certainly don't try to deviate it from in more than one way. So the team has been very particular in standardizing 7 levels, for example, and kind of maybe 10 questions at the first level, and then 20 questions each of the subsequent ones, and 5 bonuses. And that consistency being there is almost like a crutch for some people to do when they're reading the questions. And so kind of it's in there for good reason. Um, it helps people know what to expect. It formalizes the whole thing, and if you deviate from it, then the team will kind of, for that reason, they will edit your case and they will add levels or take out levels, or so I'd say definitely try to keep to that kind of question structure, but also if you're adding too many new elements at once, you'll end up um, basically confusing the viewers. People like new things and change, but they don't like too much of it at once. And kind of the bigger the competition gets, the more heated the competition gets, the more this kind of thing is going to matter. So they try to stick, at least most of the time, to the general format um, that they set up, and keep the instructions very short and simple. So once you've kind of got those bits, um, the you've probably got a case that people at least will not complain about, right? So there might not be any standout, very particularly enjoyable elements at this point, but they will, and they won't complain about it particularly. Um, and so I would argue this quite new development, really, but I would argue that the next thing that you want to put in is well, I was about to say storytelling, but let me put that to the side for one moment. Instead, I will say is an interesting problem to solve. So obviously, a lot of people are new and they're not familiar with previous questions that have come up. But for people who have seen a lot of the similar questions before, they'll probably find something. Maybe they could see it as a good opportunity to practice their skills they developed in the past. But generally they'll feel like, oh, I've seen this before. People have learnt how to do this and memorized how to do this. This is a kind of a metagamed thing. And and so while they might still enjoy the case, they might feel it doesn't stand out as anything special. It's not kind of really added anything to the format. um I guess, kind of, to go along with that, I talk about difficulty. So what you don't want to do with difficulty is you don't want people to feel like they get stuck. It's okay to have a very easy case. It's okay to have a very hard case. But what you don't want is people kind of banging their heads against the wall. Kind of been guilty about this at all, sorry, a little bit in the past. What I try to do, though, for difficulty is I try to put one kind of very hard question, or maybe it's a novel element question, as a bonus 5 always. um, and um, and then have a set of levels where the kind of the top players might just about get through it in 30 minutes. um, but the kind of the people who are starting out or at the lower levels can make progress, generally on the previous levels, or there's some particular concept that they learn. This is already slightly contradictory, but maybe what I should do is I should go through my cases I've written and talk about what I was thinking during them. But I think to make your case stand out and to make it kind of one people will remember fondly going forward, you definitely want to have, it doesn't have to be a change to the format in some sense, but it does have to be something new or something kind of people won't have seen before in Excel. I think a really good example of someone doing something like this is Peter Schall, who did Treasure Hunt, and I think the other one was called 30-Minute Mystery. And the kind of element that he introduced on those was that he played around with the idea of the bonus questions. So you have your 7 levels, and you have your 5 bonus questions, and typically they are entirely divorced from each other. And one of the reasons that we actually divorce them from each other is because people who get stuck on the main levels can then work on the bonus levels instead, right? They don't get that feeling of being stuck that I was talking about before. But what Peter did is, well, to help people feel like they're not getting stuck, he made the 7 regular levels kind of quite easy in the grand scheme of things. Like, a lot of players will have been able to do that in the 30 minutes. Um, and then he made the bonuses um, be based on the answers to the other question. So to the other questions. So in Treasure Map, it was the other the all the answers kind of give you kind of coordinates on a map or locations on a map, and then the bonuses you're kind of then doing a map type element on those coordinates in order to find the treasure. And people found that like really enjoyable and exciting. There's this sense of satisfaction to getting those last few bonus levels out, because it's almost like the entire case has been building up to it in a very material way, and there's a kind of a yes no reward right at the end of it. um, so yeah, it just feels very good to get to the end of those cases, I think. um, I've tried to introduce, as I said, I've tried to introduce these types of things as well. So my first case, it was called the social network, and effectively you're presented with a matrix data format at the beginning. So I don't think we'd seen a matrix data format by that point. To be honest, by that point, most of the cases previously had been kind of financial model driven. So I don't know. I think there had been maps before that point, but generally when you had data, it was in a kind of financial model-y data format or a table-y data format. So it wasn't something people had seen before. And the nice thing about matrices is there's a lot of things you can do with them. They're representatives of kind of linear algebra. It's a type of maths, and it's quite a versatile type of math. So, for instance, it forms the basis of statistics. Basis is a okay for any linear algebra fans. Basis was pun intended there. Um, but statistics is built on it. Language model. The recent language models are actually built on it as well. Almost all fields of maths are built on linear algebra because when something is linear, it's easy to understand. Um, so I tried to add that matrix element, and um, my second case after that, the second one that's presented was Lana Banana, and this was definitely a case where people will have gotten stuck. So what you had to do was there was a monkey going and collecting some bananas, and um, the monkey could either move down left, down, or down right. So kind of every single action, you're kind of progressing through this square from the top to the bottom. And the early questions were quite spatial, a little bit about maps. Maps are quite new at this point, so people didn't have the kind of prep they have these days for them. And so that was a little bit novel. So you're either going straight down collecting bananas, and there are lots of ways you can do that. Nowadays, I think the best way to do it is with dynamic referencing with a colon in the middle, which at the time people wouldn't have thought of that as much, I think. Um, but the idea of the second level where the monkey either moved down left or down right, I think that was quite new to a lot of people. We hadn't seen move consistently in this direction before, with diagonals. So that was a new element. But kind of more importantly, the rest of the 3 main levels were all um, solved in an inductive way. So your monkey is going kind of down, down left, and down right, and the idea is you're trying to pick up on this map as many bananas as possible. And the way that you solve this is kind of you notice it's already solved for the bottom level, and for the second level up, you could kind of work that out manually, or you could say, "Hang on, I know what it is at the bottom level, and if I start at this particular point on the second row, I can then add that answer to the ones on the next level, and then you can kind of repeat that logic inductively up and up and up until you've solved the entire grid." So the kind of new element here was this idea of inductive reasoning or dynamic programming, as people might call it in finance or in programming. They call it that in finance, particularly in high frequency trading, because there's a lot of this. It's a marketing. Okay, I'm not going to explain martingales, but it's a lot of kind of throw the past away and only look at the current step that happens in high frequency trading. Um, so yeah, that was those were the two new elements there, and I think a weakness of that case was people felt stupid and they felt stuck and everything. But it's stuck in people's minds, and I think a lot of people remember it because it taught them this idea of the inductive reasoning, and a lot of people will have had a kind of aha moment, and that feels good in the long run because you feel like you've learned something. The next case I did of that was flower power. There is a lot of hidden maths going on behind the scenes, but it's not really tested very well in the case. Um, it's more of a um, procedural type case. Certainly, the version that was sent out in the end. Um, the idea there was that you had this map of or this square of dandelions and tulips. So they're both basically all like 1 or 0 for whether it's a dandelion or a tulip. And then you pick one of the squares and you flip the flower in it to the other one, and you flip all of the neighboring flowers as well. And kind of in the original case, you then ultimately have to kind of solve it. So there would all be tulips or all be sunflowers. But in the actual case, you didn't have to do that. You just had to kind of repeatedly apply the operations. So it's a little bit spatial there, but after Lana Banana and everything, I think people are getting more savvy to this sort of thing. And it probably wasn't like it's probably my least favorite case I've written because um, maybe the idea of working with text and flipping it like that into binary, maybe some people found that novel, but I think overall it's the least novel of the ones that I've made. Next up, two cases that got quite controversial. Um, so there was Clash on Titan, and there was Lana Goes Ice Skating. So Clash on Titan, it's effectively four of the very top players, four people who'd previously been champions, um, were turned into bosses in the form of for a boss battle, and all the rest of us were kind of up against them. And I kind of wrote this case while the World Championship of 2024, while everyone was kind of winding up to that. So I think kind of not having plans to go to Las Vegas and everything, I wanted to get involved somehow and kind of have some kind of payoff for that excitement. And and really that the idea came more from the story side than anything else. Um, so I very much had the idea first, and I know I'd seen there were battle cases in the past. So I think in 2021 there was knights and warriors was like a battle case between archers, swordsmen, and horsemen or something between two armies. Um, and actually, I'd always wanted to write a case like that because, like under the hood, it's actually a Pokemon case. I do like Pokemon. Um, and thinking about Pokemon case, but the problem with it is it's so complicated. You set up a type chart and everything. But what I had here was effectively everybody's got one Pokemon move, and they all have a Pokemon ability, and you throw away types and everything else. Well, the kind of the top players all had one Pokemon ability in this battle. Um, so it's from a case design perspective, you probably want to have both a good problem idea and a good story idea simultaneously. But I think kind of this one very much started as just the story idea, and I was just very excited to go and write it. I will defend it a little bit though. So um, ultimately, I built up that problem idea, and what I had in my head was that it would teach building a scalable model. So that all of the problems, well, certainly the ones I sent in, all of the problems I sent in built off each other one by one. So you had a battle against just Michael, and then you had a battle against like two of them, and then against four of them, and then four of them with another rule or something. Um, and um, it was very easy to build a model that would solve only one Titan, but then wouldn't generalize to the later levels. So, kind of the teaching element I was going for there was, always read ahead on the questions. Specifically, if the first problem is quite hard, try to look ahead. I think we've kind of had this a few times actually, particularly on some of the game cases. So we've had Othello, where if you got level 3, the last two levels were actually quite easy if you did it in a certain way. Probably the same of backgammon. Although what I will say is the two cases I've just mentioned are kind of extremely difficult cases notoriously. Othello is probably not as hard anymore, but backgammon still is. Um, so I think this kind of approach is most easy to set up on hard levels. It's kind of teaching direction is easiest to set up on hard levels, which is a bit unfortunate. Um, I think the whole thing really was an allegory for the Microsoft Excel World Championship. Everybody's going and they're battling Dim, Michael, Andrew, whatever. Um, and so I was hoping that would make it really fun for the players. I wasn't in Vegas. I don't know how fun they found it, but I think they definitely found it quite hard. And there's a lot of kind of that case was way too hard going on. Um, yeah, that was cool. Um, for me, it was quite a sight because it was something like 2 a.m. and I'd had a message from Giles earlier in the day saying, "I'm looking at your Titan case, and oh my god, I love it." And I'm thinking, I only sent that in really recently. Like, why are you looking at this as commentator? And they not only did they use it that same day, but straight afterwards, the only other case they did that day, at least in the XL World Championship, was this other case I've mentioned, Lana Goes Ice Skating. So there's kind of a double whammy of my cases and that I'd written in this kind of form, and people found them quite difficult. Um, so I don't know. I think that's given me a kind of reputation now. I don't know how accurate that reputation is, but I don't think Clash on Titan was fully successful because it was too hard. That teaching element wasn't there, and I think particularly it wasn't there when I was thinking of the case originally. Like I added that later, and that probably made it not a fully formed idea. So the next one was Lana Goes Ice Skating. So Lana Banana had become quite notorious as a character. I think the juxtaposition between the new kind of algorithmic element of that case and like a nice friendly monkey just eating some bananas, like the story of the case might be what you'd expect in like a kids puzzle or kids book, but then the actual challenge was quite difficult, and that kind of juxtaposition was positive. So I thought, well, people enjoyed Lana Banana as a character. Let me write a sequel. And so I wrote Lana Goes Ice Skating. Um, I'd had the idea of writing a kind of case to do with bouncing in the past, and inspired by the DVD logo that goes around on maybe if you're watching a DVD or something and you don't press any buttons for a while. There's a DVD logo that starts bouncing around. So I'd had that idea, and the and I'd also recently started going to ice skating. I think I just had like 1 or 2 weeks at that point, but I was finding it quite fun. And kind of putting those two ideas together, you then have an idea for a case. And certainly the idea of bouncing was something that hadn't appeared on a map case before. Um, so but basically, because it was a sequel to Lana Banana, I took some of the ideas from the early Lana Banana levels, and because it was kind of quite notorious, I didn't feel that bad directly copying the case. I did change the questions a little bit, um, but for the early levels, there's no shame in having something quite familiar. Get people into the case a bit. And I had this idea, of course, for the last level and last couple of levels, of this bouncing. Um, and then I didn't have a middle piece, and I think that's probably where I went wrong. So I think both of those ideas I've just said are really good, but if you're going to have the idea for a full case, you want to have something probably for every level, or some clear idea for every level. Because what I ended up doing for levels 4 and 5 was I started adding in the idea of speed. Um, so position, everyone knows how to do position. This is kind of what we're used to on map cases. And because I didn't have an idea and I couldn't think of like an in-between difficulty piece, I added something unrelated, or orthogonal, which is the speed. Um, and what it did is it basically complicated the instructions a lot. So it got me too far away probably from this idea of always try to keep the questions very simple. Um, so it ended up complicating the middle levels quite a lot. And although you can get it out quite quickly, it was a lot of instructions to parse in the time. So this was probably another issue of kind of where I fell down a little bit on the case design. Um, I if I was to write that case again, I'd probably get rid of so the speed was controlled by items on the lake, which were snowmen and ice crystals. I'd probably just get rid of all of those, and maybe I'd kind of build up to the bouncing more bit by bit over several levels. So maybe I could have kind of only vertical and down bouncing, and then maybe only diagonals on direct corners as in between levels, and then kind of you're getting to the bouncing bit earlier, so more people would have seen that, and kind of level 7 wouldn't be so scary because I would have held your hand, kind of building up to it in the earlier levels. And then my most recent experience writing a case, and this is where I get into story a bit more, was with We're Not in Kansas Anymore, which was the Road to Las Vegas 2025 first case. And what I wanted to do here was, so all of the cases so far, it's like, it simulates a game of cribbage or backgammon or whatever. It's, here's an algorithm, like go and learn it, like with Lana Banana. It's here's some data, let's do some fun things with it and maybe a twist based on whatever the topic is. Um, but I felt that there was more you could do than with that. Um, this is where my explaining kind of isn't going to be very good. This is where I need to kind of think and stop for a moment, so I say something useful, I think. Well, in the meantime, I can tell you where the idea came from. So I was out with my family, and some of them had just seen Wicked. I hadn't seen Wicked at that point. I have now. It's very good. Um, and they were talking about Wicked, and there was another person there who was my sister's boyfriend, who's from Austria, and he's not heard of The Wizard of Oz before and not heard of Wicked before. So obviously everyone was saying, "Oh, Wicked is like a is fan fiction almost of The Wizard of Oz," and he said, "Okay, well, what's The Wizard of Oz?" And so we started telling him about the original 1939 film, and we mentioned the yellow brick road. And so I had this visual in my head of the yellow brick road. I remember thinking something like, "Well, that's a very familiar image, having kind of cells next to each other like that." However, they're slightly offset. Aha, I have a case idea. And the other contributing idea was probably and I've mentioned this already, but Klinsmann's isometric chaos, where it was a map case, but the twist was that the map you were working on wasn't on the traditional Excel grid, but the kind of grid itself was transformed in some way. And so putting those two ideas together, um, I thought we've got something here. We've got the storytelling, a story of the Wizard of Oz within the Excel case, and not only can this add the whole story idea and move away from kind of here's a single game or here's a single task or here's we're doing this kind of I don't know, I don't want to call out any cases on something like this, but we're doing this kind of very procedural thing. um it's let's tell an enjoyable story, and let's make it something that's fun to work through, not only on a kind of problem solving level, but also just on a kind of reading level. um so I wrote that one up, and what I tried to do there was I tried to keep um, I tried to adhere to that original principle of case design of keeping the instructions very simple, but still telling the story, and by separating the law from the questions in a very kind of meaningful way. So I put the law in italics right at the beginning, and then I put the question kind of underneath, not in italics, and also took the pictures idea from isometric chaos. So the kind of the people who don't speak English maybe as fluently as native speakers, for example, could look at the pictures and they could quickly tell what was instructions and what was law, and they could just focus on what was important. Um, so I'd like to think that this would hopefully inspire other people to include more storytelling in their cases to kind of up the enjoyment that way. Um, I felt very good about putting that case out. Um, Also, when you do something like that, you have to pay respects to the source material in some way. And certainly, one of the big moments in that story is taking on the Wicked Witch, and that doesn't happen on the Yellow Brick Road. So I thought a good way to kind of distinguish it and almost make the statement in the case that the story is good, or that I was being faithful to the story, is to separate that Wicked Witch level out from everything else, not have it be to do with the Yellow Brick Road, but instead have it to be with I think Dorothy certainly in the film, I think in the book as well, throws a bucket of water over the Wicked Witch, and so I knew I had to do something with water there. And because the question design there, the fact that the map was transformed into offset bricks, that was already a new element. Um, but in that story, it's not just the yellow brick road that's an iconic location, but it's also the Emerald City. And so I felt I had to do something with the Emerald City. I did spend like a couple of minutes trying to make a nice Excel picture that was a bit like the Emerald City, putting like green towers in it. But ultimately, it's a bit lackluster. It didn't really like do credit to the case. So what I did was I took my pixel art generator thing, and I got an AI image generator to just generate an image of the Emerald City, and and kind of made a question based on that. Of course, using that pixel art, I was quite limited in what I could ask. There wasn't like data in the cells or anything, and you couldn't really use it as a map because there weren't distinguishing boundaries or anything. Everything kind of was quite fluent into each other. Um, and so I ended up using my younger self's like wandering thoughts as inspiration. And when I was younger, I wondered, um, when the Emerald City appears on the screen, there's this kind of almost frame filling green throughout, and they're all of the citizens are kind of touting how green and perfect the Emerald City is. And so obviously your curious younger self says, okay, but how green is the Emerald City? Um, and one way you could measure that is with RGB values. And so I felt it kind of quite natural that the question I had to ask there had to be about the green RGB value. Um, luckily I knew how to do that at the time. Obviously, to write an interesting question, you have to be able to work out that it can be done in a simple way. And certainly, if you're writing new elements, I imagine that would be quite hard sometimes. But if you've got any kind of experience mucking around with Excel, then you almost certainly bumped into something. It might not be front of mind, but you will have bumped into something that um, people won't have seen or are unfamiliar with. Um, yeah, I don't know. I felt very good about that one, as I've said. Um, so, summarizing the lessons from all of those, I think in terms of my favorite cases, I might have a very different ordering. But in terms of what was a successful case, I think the social network was kind of very, very successful. People really liked that one. The difficulty wasn't very hard. It was a new data format. People enjoyed working on that. And there was a hidden maths twist at the end for some of the enthusiasts that got them quite excited. Lana Banana. Um, okay, I don't want to call it unsuccessful because I think it did push the format forward a bit. People got really into the character, and it's I think it's now inspiring a lot of stuff. But I think at the time it went out, it was mixed. So people who were kind of quite into this type of algorithm thing were able to work it out either in the time or kind of just after, or so some of the people who then watched others or whatever, they quite liked it. But some people who maybe weren't so into maths and computing and such like that thought the barrier to entry was quite hard and that it was kind of insurmountable for them. Um, so yeah, I don't know. The success of Lana Banana was probably quite mixed. My personal view is that anyone can work it out. They just have to be confident and they have to be able to kind of take the time, work through it carefully. Obviously 30 minutes isn't very long, especially if you've kind of spent a while on the first two questions. But my level three did kind of hint at it. This is the way you want to think about it for doing the level four. So I think level three was based on lower down. Level four, so it's only two part. The monkey thing can only go one or two rows down, whereas in the later level they could go any number of rows down. Um, I think that's probably quite a good idea if you're going to ask a hard question. Is just to try to guide the user through it somehow with your earlier levels. So Lana Banana was mixed. Flower Power. Um, I think people quite neutral on that. So I don't think anyone particularly disliked it, but I don't think it really stood out as a good case. Um, in my personal view, neutral as a case for us is probably worse than mixed. I don't know if everybody will agree with me on that. Um, but I value the kind of long term impact a case has and how it inspires creativity in other case authors probably more than I value the initial reaction on the day. So as long as people didn't hate it, I think I would say that I prefer that neutral response. No, sorry, that mixed response from Lana Banana to the neutral response of Flower Power. Um, Although since then, on the kind of director's cut version of Level 7, I've kind of shown off the maths way to do that. That's you know, I don't know. I think it's interested a couple of people, maybe not that many, but a couple of people. So that's cool. Clash on Titan and Lana Goes Ice Skate probably go together. I know some people liked Lana Goes Ice Skating. I don't know if anyone liked Clash on Titan particularly. Um, and so I mean, they're probably the two least well-received cases I've written. Probably Clash on Titan being the least. And I guess the lesson for me there is one about calibrating the difficulty. So well, the kind of the rule of thumb I was using, and that people have kind of mentioned before, is that if you can comfortably solve it in 20 minutes yourself, while in practice or whatever, then that means it's probably a good level of difficulty. But both of those cases needed a lot of careful decision making about the setup, and also to parse the rules in your head and make sure you've understood them. There's kind of 3 or 4 lines of rules at least on both of them. So um, I don't think 20 minutes for me to comfortably solve it was the right benchmark. Really, it should have been probably a bit longer, a bit shorter. Um, yeah, and then finally, Kansas, and we're not in Kansas anymore. I think it's very well received. There's a bit of a question about difficulty and putting off new players. I think particularly as there was a lot of new entrants that year. But personally, I don't really buy into that as much, because I think um, the enjoyment of the case is much more complicated than just the difficulty. And also, if it's your first time attempting one of these cases, even if it's a quote unquote easy case, um, you're still probably going to be quite discouraged when you see how you did compared to the other competitors. So I would hope that the storytelling elements, the fun elements, the whole, working on the messed up grid, the whole story aspect, people will have found enjoyable enough that they'd, want to come back for the next one. Um, okay, I should also mention I can point to Dim and say Dim, effectively got 1250 on that, so give or take a small error on bonus 4. Um, and in a wrong question. I own up to the wrong question on level 7, which was my fault. Um, so by the rule of one person getting 1250 means the difficulty is probably pretty good. I would say that's a good difficulty case. Maybe that would have been a better kind of finals, semi-finals case. But given the film had just come out, that's a reason to put it early. Given it might inspire others to change their case designs, improve their case designs in some ways. Not quite good about that. Um, so yeah, that's been my experience, and I guess to sum up my case designing philosophy, it's um, if you've got some twist on the format, great. Keep it to kind of one twist per thing. Keep the twist quite light. Give a lot of thought to making very clear, short instructions where you can. Hold nothing back in your attempts to make the case fun. Um, Fun. Actually, I should talk a little bit more about that not exactly being number one priority, but almost being number one priority. Um, yeah, so very much focus on making it fun above everything else. And um, I should mention one thing I've seen other people do. I haven't done this really yet, but I've always been impressed when I've seen this is when people make the cases kind of have their personality in them, right? It says something solid about them. Maybe my cases do that, and I just don't pick up on it. Um, Particularly Harry Watson's cases, it comes through quite nicely. His personality, for example, and quite like that. It makes the case. It gives the case a nice feel. Um, so I'm quite impressed by that as well. Um, and well, the bits so far I've mentioned probably for everybody. I think everybody should also try to do something new, at least a little bit of a new thing. I don't think there's much value in like just rehashing previous questions beyond kind of rewarding people for practice, maybe. So I'd always try to do something new. Um, and um, yeah, so make them fun, right? In summary, make them easy to understand and fun to do, and that doesn't mean making them easy or making them hard. It just means someone kind of after they've done it will think, oh, that was at least one of the things I did there was quite cool. But yeah, I should talk about what the goal when designing a case really is. Um, so obviously you've got the goals of the competition and you've got your personal goals when you're writing a case. And the goals of the competition are effectively to um, either reward people for participating in some way. So that might be by teaching them something or showing them something very, very cool in Excel. Um, but primarily the goal for the FNWC team is to drive engagement, right? It's to make people want to come back and whether that's a form of I want to improve my skills in this competition, or it's I want to kind of be involved with the community in some way. I don't know. But basically just driving engagement, and then your personal goals will be very personal to you. So maybe you want to have the experience of writing a case and having somebody then kind of put that in the competition and hear how others feel about it. And obviously, if that's your goal, then absolutely try to put your personality in some way. Try to maybe put some topics that you're passionate about in there in some way that then you can chat to people about afterwards. Um, it might be something like what maybe you just want to give back to the FMWC team for because you enjoy the competitions. In which case, it would be um, just try to do what the FMWC team wants, I guess, and then any other like side quests you can achieve while writing that case, they're kind of all the better. For me, I just like coming up with kind of creative problems and then seeing people have a go at them. So a big driver for me is the adding something new, is the adding the creative elements. So I'm always trying to introduce something new. Um, Probably in terms of the original ones I sent in, probably the weakest example, the least new one I've sent in is Lana Goes Ice Skating, and I think the idea of modeling the bouncing is still kind of quite a push forward. Also, the idea of putting the speed, although I did rake on it a bit earlier, it is new. And right, this is a way that you can add a second layer of difficulty onto a map case if you maybe word it a bit better than I did. Um, and I still feel like that's quite quite a lot of new creativity in there for a single case. So yeah, I think that that bit is, I've been relatively successful in always putting new elements in cases. Um, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open the case designer chat, where there's a very nice post by Peter Schall who talks about case design, and I'm just gonna make sure I've not missed anything from there, because that's an excellent list that he put together. So just give me a moment, and I'll do that. Uh, do not spoiler anything of your case to anybody. Maybe it's not pinned anymore. So there's kind of a maximum time a message can be pinned for in WhatsApp, and I think it's exceeded now. But so yeah, I can't track that list, sadly. But yeah, okay. Well, we've talked about that for a while now. I'm gonna get this thing back up and spin the wheel again. Okay, well, hang on, let me just copy this up, and then wish me luck. So we've done Excel World Cup case design, Excel World Championship case design. Here we go. Nihilism. Oh God, what a change in topics this is. See if I can remember what I even meant by this. Well, I can definitely talk about nihilism for a while. I know this is a bit of a downer topic. Right, so I'm just going to hide this screen, start talking about nihilism. Enjoy. So nihilism is well, first, just for anyone who doesn't know what it is, it's kind of the philosophy of nothing matters, right? So nothing matters is probably a feeling that people have um, at many points in their life. It feels often that kind of no matter what we do as individuals, the trajectory of history might be the same sometimes, or it might be that um, you've grown up and you're expecting all of these. You've been told about all these cool things like being an astronaut and a pirate and whatever, and then you come into the, the world of work and you're like sat at a desk job or something. It's just feels unsatisfying in life. Um, so yeah, this is the philosophy of nihilism. I think it's often attributed to Nietzsche, but I think what really happened with Nietzsche is that Nietzsche came in and he kind of described nihilism and then explained this is why we need to move past it. We need to like build on top of it, because if nothing matters, then kind of have I like destroyed the sense of purpose behind us all being alive? This seems like quite a negative thing. Um, so he wasn't really like in favor of nihilism, but it's often associated with founding it. Um, Certainly, nihilism is something I've experienced the feeling of. I think it's people attribute kind of maliciousness or kind of mockery or something to me sometimes when actually it's kind of a lack of passion for something stemming from a quite inner feeling of nihilism about the world, and do sometimes feel quite powerless to change things. There's going on 8 billion people on Earth, and actually that, yeah, I could talk about this a bit. So the whole idea behind like learning, let's go with software engineering, but maybe you could have an equivalent in finance or an equivalent in maths or something. Like when you're growing up and you're told, you're talented at X, Y, and Z, like you could really make a difference to the world, and then you get there and kind of we live in a society that's structured in a very particular way. So there's the set of regulators and governance. There's the set of corporations, and the corporations have this obligation to kind of either do what the shareholders want if it's kind of private and limited, or if it's public, it's always to maximize shareholder value no matter what. And you get there and you realize a lot of, maybe there are engineering efficiencies that you can do, or things you can build that just make the whole system work faster. But ultimately, in terms of the actual incentives that are set up, people are already aligned quite closely with them, and it's quite difficult to have a big radical idea that would shake all of that up and then for that to have any kind of like practical impact. um, so you get this feeling of nothing I do matters, all I'm doing is kind of making the, maybe if you work for a company, it would be the shareholders of that. What I should do actually is, because someone's now suddenly watching and I'm just talking about nihilism, I'll keep the screen and then I'll just explain that this is. So I've talked about this for some time, and I'm now talking about this. Um, so you get to the company and you realize what all the incentive structures are doing, and you realize that actually, like what I'm doing at this company, certainly if I just fill my role normally, if I don't have some kind of really radical idea, it doesn't really matter what I do. Um, and that can be quite depressing. It can be quite negative. It can give you quite negative energy. You feel, should I be, what is the point of me being here? What's the point? I felt I was destined for kind of this grand purpose, and that I get this sense of achievement in life. But the whole way that I have to kind of earn rent or money or whatever, um, and I'm put in this position where I can't make real change to the world. Um, but on the flip side of that, there's also kind of a freeing element to it. So particularly if something negative happens to you or something bad, it's always, okay, maybe some shareholders lost value, maybe, somebody got very, very upset. Um, and I'm not saying you should like it doesn't matter if they do, but ultimately, if you do something negative, you can always be it's usually the negative impact is not as big as it is in your head, right? And nihilism kind of can act as a way to kind of help you understand that as an individual. So um, certainly in the modern age, where there's more and more people, and kind of maybe the individual power attributed to a particular person living in that society is kind of getting lower and lower. Nihilism is kind of growing, and it's probably been growing for some time. um, I think the 60s are often touted as when, as the kind of the peak of culture, and after that culture kind of started to decline. um, and we can talk about kind of systems getting more and more efficient, particularly the capitalist system getting more and more efficient in this case, and how that can lead to nihilism. But yeah, it's certainly on the rise and has been for quite a long time now. Um, and one more thing that one of my friends told me recently is that um, sometimes I come across as having quite like a dark edge sometimes, or maybe there's a malicious like darkness behind my eyes occasionally. And then what she said is that actually I think this is just like existential nihilism kind of expressing itself. And I think that's right. So it's definitely um, fun to be in, okay, so you come across nihilism for the first time, you feel very, it's very depressing, you feel very not very powerful, you're not going to make a big change on the world very easily. um Obviously that can then make people sad and so on for an extended period of time, but in the long run you can then start building on that, right? If nothing kind of really matters, then what are we here for? Well, that means that we get to choose our own purpose in life. And actually, a lot of a lot of kind of the ethics that come out of that is let's just all try to have some fun. Let's try to have kind of a good time and some fun and smiles. Let's try to make everyone feel quite good. While we can, while we're all still here. And so there's this kind of positive side to nihilism as well, where it kind of enables you to be a bit more chaotic, a bit more fun, a bit more jokey. Um, I think the evil that I wrote down here, I can't remember exactly what I was thinking when I wrote it, but it was basically alluding to this. And yeah, I don't know. I find there's kind of a freeing element in it as well. Um, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go for the next one. I'm not talking about that for as long as the Excel World Championship. So here we go. What it means to have an ethical career. Oh no, come back. Oh, okay, hang on. What it means to have an ethical career. Okay, so we live in a very kind of complex dynamical system, right? Where it's often quite difficult to connect cause to effect and back. So maybe if you work in finance, maybe if you work, for example, in a lot of my friends work in trading, right? They've done the maths or they've done the engineering or whatever, and then they've gone and worked in high paying job, which often is high frequency trading. Um, and it's oh, hi Tim. I'm trying something. I don't know how long you've been in, but I've been here a while, and I'm just explaining like random topics on this list. So I've explained Excel World Championship case design. I've had a go at explaining this, although I can't really remember what I was thinking when I wrote it down. And now I'm going to have a go at explaining this. Um, so in a world where you are kind of not able to join up the dots very easily, both between what you do and the impact it has on society, um, you know, ultimately there's a lot of okay, there might be many good things going on in the world, but there's a lot of kind of bad things going on in the world as well. And depending on exactly what you do, if you're just, like, let's say you're working on infrastructure transactions, it's not very clear whether you're just fulfilling a function in society, and and if you're fulfilling a function in society, then if you weren't there, then somebody else might be filling that function as well. So you might claim that's kind of ethics neutral. If you're working, but you could claim the same of if you're working in a let's say you're working in something that's traditionally seen as a bit evil, right? So let's say you're working in deforestation. You could make the same argument if it wasn't me, then somebody else would be doing it. Or even if you're on like one of the trains in early 1940s Germany, you could say, oh, somebody else would be doing it. So I feel like I'm ethics neutral in the world. Um, so given that as we've been over, nothing matters. Um, and it's what's important is trying to make sure kind of have people have positive experiences while they're there. um, Ethics and the idea of having doing something ethical with your time, it gets relatively, it becomes something that you could almost choose as kind of an option for something that you want to care about. um, so I think, um, if I worked in something like the trains I mentioned, or whatever, then I would feel like, despite the philosophy of okay, society provides the roles and you just fill one of them. Ultimately, if you're working for something, then by somebody's judgment, you are the best fit for that. You're the best position for that, and therefore you are making whatever you're working on kind of very marginally more efficient. Like, it's not true that as individuals we don't have any agency over the world in what we choose to do. So I would say that kind of you might not have like full extent of responsibility for the kind of work that you choose to go into, and it might not always be clear whether what you're doing is unethical, like, really or not. um, but yeah, you do have choice and agency there, and ultimately you do own kind of a small piece of the pie for changing efficiencies, and therefore I think this is something people should at least think about. Um, so I at the moment work for a company called Acuity Pricing, and actually it being ethical is one of the things that kind of makes me proud to work there. It makes me feel very good to work there. So what we do is we scrape all of the prices from all of the supermarkets in the mornings every day, and then my job particularly is then to match up those products. So maybe I'm matching up the dairy milk, you know, or I just pick something international. Oh, I don't know international foods. Maybe I'm matching up the 500 milliliters of strawberry water at one retailer with the equivalent version at another retailer. And so I'm going and matching all these products up. What then happens is those kind of matched up, packaged up versions of all of the retailers' like listings. Um, we sell those back to some of the retailers or to particular brands, or maybe we sell them to like universities or something for studies occasionally. Um, and and ultimately well, certainly the retailers and the brands do their price promotion strategies based on it. And so effectively what the job is doing is it's increasing the visibility of price and promotion strategies between retailers. And kind of certainly in economic theory, this is meant to push prices down, right? In the sense that oh, they're selling product A for less money than I'm selling product A for. I should, if I can, reduce my price to either match or to exceed it. If this is the kind of product that gets driven by price. There are kind of dark sides to this sort of thing as well. So, maybe one day we'll live in a future world where price is like really heavily tailored to individuals. Maybe this whole system gets very, very efficient, and maybe the price label like scans your face and gives you a different price depending on who you are, and ultimately then that's kind of taking away from in some way from levels of reward that we attribute to certain things in society. So, if we attributed rewards in let's say in an ethical, fair way, yeah, right. But let's say that we did in this far future, then this kind of price label thing would be quite unethical, really. And you could argue it's unethical even if we don't attribute everything fairly. Um, so it's definitely not kind of fully black and white, but I think kind of for where we are at the moment in history, my work of making the matching up of these products more efficient does contribute positively in a way that kind of benefits the many people over the profits of a kind of a relatively small number of people at the retailers, right? And this is part of the like economic kind of contract that the world is into. Is the idea is meant to be that there's competition between companies, and that helps control prices so that people can consume things. I'm definitely working on kind of the positive side of that. I think a lot of the difficulty in kind of finding and choosing an ethical career is that, and I'll explain this, is that more jobs are unethical than are ethical in some sense, right? So I'm talking particularly about private jobs here, not like government jobs. So, ultimately, the page one of the corporate finance handbook is the company exists to make money for the shareholders. We don't factor into economics currently. Um, we don't factor in ethics. We don't factor in, you know, like there's no. Okay, maybe there might be regulations in some places, but by and large, there's no like premium you pay that represents the natural damage that you're doing to the world by using the base resources. um there's no kind of penalty that goes into a kind of greater good pot that you pay when you do something that's maybe slightly more damaging to the environment than something else. So, on an average over the whole set of actions you can possibly take, Something like rewarding using a paper bag over a plastic bag, generally the cheaper way to do it. Um, is technically the better way for the company, even if it's not as sustainable environmentally or such. Um, so in that way, a company is inherently like misaligned with the good of society in some way. And because of that, working for a company kind of is more likely on average to be unethical. Like if you consider the company to be the sum of the like individual actions, right? And overall it's maybe slightly negative. Let's say then on average people will be in unethical careers, right? Um, so yeah, I mean, it's quite difficult. You can attribute a lot of the blame on this in some way to society. Like maybe if we had these kind of penalties and were able to enact them in a sensible way, then maybe it would be easier to have an ethical career without making personal sacrifices. Um, maybe companies wouldn't kind of reward the ability to make unethical decisions with more power. Um, but it's very hard to come up with a system where that's applied kind of first of all consistently, right? But also in a way that doesn't um reward, let's say, untoward or illegal behavior with higher profit. um Now obviously an ethical career sometimes can suddenly turn unethical. Let's say new leadership has come in. Let's say that some decisions have been changed about where effort goes, about what kind of things we're willing to do. um I don't think it rests solely on the individual to have an ethical career. Like it's definitely there's a collective piece to that. Yeah, but um certainly as an individual, I would generally try to choose ethical locations. And I think I was faced between a decision of making more money and being more ethical. A lot of people would make the argument that you would go for the place with more money, and then, if you were really caring that much about being ethical, you could then use that more money to do kind of more good than the extra damage you're doing. Um, is that true? It's certainly true if you actually go and do it, but kind of ergonomically, it's it's more difficult than that. Like you're gonna have um personal priorities. Like maybe you have a family you want to look after, you want to like save to make sure you're secure in retirement or something. Like it's I think most people who offered that choice and then use that to justify one decision over another would then kind of not make that monetary contribution to ethics in some way. um and especially it's very easy to muddy the water on something like this by saying, well, it's not very clear, whether what I'm doing here contributes kind of more positively or negatively than if somebody else, the second person, was here. So I would say that, what you want to do is you want to think about, you want to personally I would try to at least not be like hugely net negative on ethics. Like I wouldn't want to be um I've come up with the trains again because it's one of the only clear examples I can give. I would definitely not want to do that. But if you're kind of only slightly evil, that's probably about average, and you probably blame society for the kind of little other piece, if that makes sense. I think to have an ethical career, you probably just want to be mindful of ethics, and you don't want to choose solely based on ethics, but you want to at least be aware of the ethics that kind of your job is having, and if you're uncomfortable with them, if you feel like you're contributing quite negatively to society, more than if were working somewhere else or such. Um, then maybe it can kind of be one of the factors in your decision. Um, yeah, cool. Let's go again. Chaotic. Okay. Okay. So I've been accused of what some what color should we go? Let's go with orange. I've been accused of being what some people would refer to as chaotic neutral. Now, this kind of ties into this one a little bit again. But effectively, what chaotic neutral means is I don't go out of my way to be kind of a particularly good or evil person. So maybe I don't particularly go and like show lots of empathy to somebody who's sad. Maybe I might try to make them cheer up, but kind of no more than a typical person or something. Um, and I'm not particularly evil. Like I'm not. Okay, I was going to give an example of an evil person. I don't want to make any particular statements here, but let's say somebody who's evil. Let's for this case define it as someone who maybe laughs at others' misfortune in a malicious way. So I wouldn't do something like that, for example, either. Um, but it does mean that I go out of my way to um, let's say act in a very free, maybe almost anarchist. I don't know how to say that. In it, let's say I try to make lots of exciting things happen, and I've got to, I enjoy when exciting things happen. Um, and I don't like following like a strict set of rules every day. That go through the prescribed order of things. Um, Now, a lot of people, certainly if you're a professional, if you're a very high up professional, or maybe you're running a very kind of important company in the sense it's very big. Maybe it's feeds a lot of other important companies a particular service or good or something. Um, then there's a lot of value in being ordered, and you become a reliable pair of hands. um, you're not going to have any, if you're very, very careful about what you send out, then you're not going to accidentally maybe push, in this example of software, you're not going to push a big bug up to the servers and ruin everybody's systems. Not naming any names here that might have brought down Windows like a year ago or something. CrowdStrike, no. So if you're very ordered, you probably will manage to avoid all of that. But on the flip side, if you're too ordered, then that stifles innovation in some way, right? So if you're always, no, you can't try that new thing because it will mean that we can't sign off this liability or something, right? And then you don't make an effort to like try that out in some way and make it work. Then you're going to be quite rigid and stuck in your ways, and eventually, in the long run, you are going to fall behind. Um, So I think it depends quite a lot on exactly what the nature of what you're trying to do is. But for me, I certainly thrive in the kind of chaotic environment where you're trying out new things, you're building new things. You're kind of not paying much heed to a particular set of laws. You're not acting in a very prescribed way. I think that um, it's quite inherent, really, to my nature. So I mean, there's probably definitions for this. I don't know what they are, but I almost am like scared or kind of very averse to doing the same thing the same way over and over. Um, there's something about repetition that my brain just really doesn't like. Like I very quickly go into the I'm very, very bored here mode and start daydreaming if something like that happens. And okay, there's value in routines in life in many things. So there's like waking up on time, and there's going to bed at the same time every day, and so on, and that will make you quite healthy and feel very, very good. So I can recognize that, but I also just would very much struggle very hard to do it. Um, so I guess that's what I mean by chaotic neutral. And I've written and the parody of mathematics here. And the specific parody that I'm talking about is Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. So I think I'm right in saying that Alice in Wonderland is a book written by a mathematician, written by Lewis Carroll, and he was kind of very into like plane geometry. He was very into like fixed algebra. He was into things that were quite tangible, really, as fields at the time. So he was maybe into like Descartes algebra specifically. And what was going on when he was, before he was writing this book, was that a lot of the fields in maths were becoming more and more abstract. So I think maybe the idea of complex numbers was coming out, like having two-dimensional numbers and having like a new multiplicative field on them. Um, but obviously that with the interpretation of like I being the square root of -1, a lot of probably like algebraic geometry, maybe hyperbolic geometry as opposed to plane geometry. Um, so kind of a lot of quite out there ideas that didn't have any tangible purpose at the time. And I don't know exactly what angle his criticism came from, but um, I think he kind of was in writing Alice in Wonderland. He was mocking the absurdity of it in some way. So he was, for example, um, described the Cheshire Cat, which is a cat that kind of can almost vanish in and out of existence. And when it vanishes out of existence, it can leave, but it leaves behind a grin. So kind of the abstract property of the cat, which is its grin, kind of remains while the cat vanishes. And this is kind of representing maybe the field of algebra on a tangible thing, but then you're kind of throwing away the tangible thing and you're kind of proving things directly about the algebra, like in like Galois theory or something. Um, and the reason I kind of bring this up in relation to chaotic neutral is kind of maybe one of the pitfalls or the downfalls of chaotic neutral is the sense of being the kind of lol I'm so random kind of personality. So it's a lot of kind of, if you're causing chaos a lot, you can fall into the trap of people having the sense it's kind of look at me kind of thing, right? Why are you always complicating things? Why are you making them more exciting? Like Alice, we're tired, right? Or Harry, we're tired. Um, and and so I don't know. I feel like there's stuff for me to think about there. In particular, the character of the Mad Hatter, who is doing a lot of abstract things, need to be quite. Well, I guess we can make the point about communication, right? So a lot of the academics and such are increasingly seen by broader society as kind of living in these ivory towers while everybody else struggles. They're kind of living there in this beautiful setting, doing these very menial jobs that kind of don't necessarily impact society in a way that's very clear, or maybe certainly they might feel that it doesn't really help society at all. Um, and there has been a kind of, certainly where science has disagreed with, let's say, political ambition or capital capital agendas. Um, there's even been an effort to kind of to push this kind of anti-intellectualism, right? This kind of, oh, they're not doing anything useful, um, and um, this is something that we should, there's not been an active effort from academia or whoever to really push back against that. Like the academics aren't really like an organized group of people with an agenda. Um, and I think what that means is that they don't have this incentive to build up the communication skills. They don't have the probably it's fair to say they don't have the patience to, but certainly they don't have the in the like material incentives to communicate to wider society and to kind of explain, why the ideas, even though they might be abstract ideas, why they, either might be useful in the future or are kind of otherwise meaningful or will benefit society. And there is an argument there of like whether all work should benefit society or not. Um, there's certainly you can describe a lot of industries, like particularly any industry where they're just middlemen, um, or where you're entering a kind of game theory system where you're only spending money because everyone else is spending money, like advertising, for example. Um, you can certainly describe those as jobs that kind of don't necessarily benefit society, but are nonetheless necessary. So there's the question of um, whether the academics like do benefit society, and then there's the question of if they, whether they do or not. Like, should we be communicating more or better? Um, and the way that ties into the chaotic neutral piece is that the chaotic neutral is inherently a position where you're kind of divorced from empathy in some way. You've moved slightly away from empathy because in order to be chaotic, you have to kind of have these independent ideas. You're not being part of a collective in some way, right? You're definitely like thinking independently of other people. And so I don't know. I feel like there's kind of a parallel between the two struggles there. You can tell I've not fully formed my thoughts on this one, especially like particularly, um, but I don't know. I feel like this is probably an accurate parody of what I'm doing, and there's something I can learn. Um, Maybe about communication, maybe about something else that I've not thought of, or maybe about you know something more refined than just communication. Um, but yeah, these two things go together. I mean, I could for fun just. I know Dim was watching this. Maybe I could try to class Dim um, into the buckets. I think Dim might be a either a true good or a neutral good or a true neutral. Um, so it depends exactly what his incentives are and what he does. But whether it's good or not. But effectively, you've got ordered, neutral slash chaotic, and you've got good, neutral, evil. Um, and I think you really don't mind having the chaotic stuff done. I think you quite like it secretly on the inside, but also you're very willing to be kind of quite structured and ordered, especially in how you learn things. So I think you've got good elements of kind of both sides here, and so I'm just stick you on neutral in the front. And then depending exactly on what your incentives like, I'm pretty confident you're not evil, right? So you're quite generous, for example, in sharing your ideas about things. Um, but whether you do that because you're trying to give back to the community, which you probably are a little bit, or whether it's kind of very much like primarily a selfish process or not, that would be what would kind of decide for me which of the two dim is. So neutral would be true neutral, and then neutral good would be, I guess, would be neutral good, wouldn't it? Cool. So I've spoken a little bit about that one. Let's roll. Hang on. Let's check the time. Okay, I've got like probably should go to bed by midnight to be honest. Streamed like all really late yesterday. Maybe I'll do. Should I do one more? Should I give up here? I mean, already we're long enough that only crazy people are going to watch this. What I want to avoid is rolling rolling one of these ones. like having to spend 30 minutes doing maths right now because it will absolutely wreck my sleep. Okay, so I think I will call it there. If people, but is it up to you whether you watch this or not? I'm not really like feeling either way. But I think it helps me to talk at length. It's probably good practice for me to talk about complicated things and try to like develop my communication skills. I guess in some way I'm going to addressing this a little bit. Um, yeah, hope you if you did watch this, I hope you enjoyed it. At least. Um, I guess I'm not truly chaotic. I'm a little sorry, truly neutral. I'm a little bit good, but for saying that as well. um, but yeah, there we go. I'll call it there. Have a lovely day, night, whatever's going on. Enjoy the incoming end of the world.